I really got disgusted in November. I went to a selectmen's meeting. I was going to go to a school committee meeting, and I graded them. If I had to grade them with a double F star, that's where we're really doing a bad job, and that is the leadership. And what we tend to do in our town is we don't solve problems, we create them. We don't have public hearings. We have public character assassinations, and we're not doing very well. These are the goals and objectives of the school committee. 3 years ago, they got very creative this year. They just condensed it down so it all fits in one page, but where I circled were the items here. But I also put some other things down to call your attention, because we don't engage the citizens. We may say we do, but we don't engage the citizens. And then if you go down for, where is the open communication? Now everybody's talking about fiscal budget responsibilities, but I don't see any fiscal budget responsibilities in any of these goals and objectives. So who's held accountable for the numbers in the school department? Whether you believe it or not, I believe it, but there's really no financial budget. Anybody that's an effective team is incapable of reducing a budget by 5 to 10% without sacrificing the quality. The customers in this case are the students of North Reading. I don't even have any children in the school system. They all went through, but I'm speaking for all the children. They're the customers we're doing this for. This is what leadership is. In my mind, we don't have the vision and the goals, the prioritization of the needs. I didn't hear tonight from the school. We need decisive decision making, and you can read the rest. We need more responsibility and accountability to students, teachers, parents, and taxpayers. I have my numbers also. I like to start at the bottom and work up. Ladies and gentlemen, you have in your warrant a couple of line items there, quote, under facilities, and if you read, you got to read very carefully, because we're either in the gas business or we're in the oil business, but it really doesn't make sense that we're putting another $10,000 in there, when in fact, if you listen to everything that's gone on with our high school, we're returning $215,000 back in energy savings. So I went to Reading Light and I find out the light bills are going down. I find out that the school is really sealed. I find out that there's only about 60% of the rooms being filled in the high school, and about 47% in the middle school. So we got the heat turned on in a lot of cases here. We got energy. We could take, that's what you call a risk assessment. There's no risk to that. In fact, you could take $20,000 off. In 100 years, this was the warmest winter, but we're still putting $10,000 more in the budget. If I got all the custodians and I put them down in the high school field, we have a problem. One man passed away. God bless his soul. I knew him very well, Mr. Lund. But in the book it says 14 and a half, but we got 16 and a half people. So somebody's getting paid and they're walking around. So I have a problem with that. I also say we ought to start looking at different things. This is what I call a hidden factory. We ought to redeploy, use seasonal hiring, consolidate with the town government. We have one person, Mr. Rusk. 1.5 people taking care of all that, and we have 14 custodians with the school. Something's out of whack. Aides and tutors, teaching aides. I raised my hand here last year, ladies and gentlemen, for $330,000 for teachers. And you heard the school committee say, well, they went and got teacher aides. I say you better re-justify it. I want to see teachers. I'm having a little problem. I'm going to show you some data later on. If they get the teachers, where's the classrooms in the lower rooms? Because most of the teachers are filled up, so I can see teacher aides moving around, but where are they going to put the teachers? That's for them to figure out. Office staff, this is what I call another hidden factory. We got the finest bookkeepers in the town working in the school department. Quote me. They ought to be up town hall. So I'm going to tell you that the school budget you read for $8 million, that's not the right number, folks. There's another $904,000 in benefits, etc., that has to be added on top of it. which I showed you last week and I'll show you again. So we're not looking at an $8 million budget, we're looking at $9.4 million. There ought to be consolidation going on with the town government if they got half of the money up there. Get the computers, tie them in. Streamline the procedures. Retrain some of the people, balance it. But we don't need that big office staff they have down there. Not when I look in the windows and see the business manager and the superintendent have computers in their office, and I'm wondering why we even need all this clerical staff for all the secretaries. I move up to teachers. I'm interested in knowing what this differential and extracurricular is, so I want to just digress for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, 1989, the cost, as you can see there, we had 148 teachers. Now we're over here, 93, 129. We dropped by that amount of teachers, 12.8% in teachers. I want to know who's negotiating these wonderful contracts that the costs are going up by 49%. And I'm paying for it, and you're paying for it. They're sitting here someplace. Somebody negotiated those. I'd like to talk about administration. When I read the Roman Empire, and they talked about Caesar and the Praetorian Guard, that's the thought that went through my head when I started to look at this here, because I'm going to show you what overhead is really in that administration. What I have up here is some suggestions. Let me unequivocally say, Mr. Pasquale is not out to get somebody's head out of the system, namely the superintendent. He knows that, and I know it. But somebody has to face up the realities here. We can do things in a compassionate way. There's some of my suggestions, but we have to take some bodies out of that administration. For this school system, we're overloaded. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the salaries. I will show you another slide. You can add $9,000 to every one of those salaries. And if you talk with the town employees, I told you last week, I have the data, it's 7,000. I have a little problem people have to explain because I'm very good with numbers. But when you get a grand total there of 557,901, but line item 57 reads 571, there's a difference of 14,000. So something's happened. Nobody's explained it to us tonight. I suspect that everybody got $1,000 or something, or there's four, but I really want to know where the $14,000 is. You ought to ask the same questions. I tell you to remember that number, because those are pretty hefty salaries there. And then I heard the word win-win when you negotiate, and I understand what win-win is. We got a win-lose all the way. You got a director of pupil personnel that is making as much money as your fire chief and your police chief. There's something wrong with the system. We got to be looking things at in the big perspective. So up here, when I look at a high school, and I have nothing against with a principal, but he's got a declining enrollment, and he's got a school system that's almost 60% filled, I say to myself, he ought to be asking some questions how we can squeeze up there. Now, I don't know where the assistant principal comes, whether it's a principal. There's all ways you can do it. One way is we take it down to the Knights of Columbus and somebody throws a dart at it. That's inhuman. But we got to face realities. We got to rebalance the budget. The money is needed for the textbooks, for the students, for the teachers, not up in this overhead. I really feel strongly what's lacking. I understand the position the school committee's in, and they're trying very hard. Across here are the schools. These are my little school blocks. The 16, 20, and 22, those represent the schools. I can't get all the data, I can't do it myself, but those are the number of classrooms. The 48 and the 60 are the percent occupancy. Over here I have everything from enrollments, their class sizes. I'm not really interested in class size, but you gotta figure out what the strategy is that's going on, because there's no master plan. And the strategy is by reducing those, quote, class sizes, inevitably somebody's going to get up here and say we got to open up the little school. That's, you know, you got to bite one or the other. The superintendent has gone on record, he's spoken to the space committee, because I got that on record, that you could move some of the 5th grade students up into the middle. I'm not here proposing it. Somebody has to face that. But what we're doing is we're going to nickel and dime this with a bunch of little ratios like you saw tonight, and we may never solve the problem. And we're going to be spending a lot of money. So I'm really putting a plea out for where's the vision for the school committee at the same time. On that administration, I'd like to say something also very sincerely. We have a superintendent that holds the longest record in office in the state of Massachusetts. We ought to be proud, for 23 years, but he's not going to stay here forever. He knows that, and he knows that I know that. And what we ought to be doing is evaluating some, quote, principles that may be in our system to see if they are caliber to be a superintendent. And I'll tell you right today, I can stand up here, you got to be taking on more and showing, demonstrating more if you're going to be a superintendent. I got to wrap it up right now. One more slide.
Your time is just about up. You have 30 seconds.
I think what we have to ask ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, is what happened to the 330,000? You heard it went into teachers' aides. You go and vote for something, they're not going to put it into the teachers, it's going to go someplace else. Here's my last slide. I had time myself. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That's the number, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not creating any new type of accounting, but when you do accounting, you have to take all your cost in and all those benefits. If the heads aren't here, the benefits aren't here, you have to see the big picture. You're talking $9,437,129, not the number that is in the line there. These are quotes, direct quotes from members of the committee. They're sincere. You know, it's straight to the bone. There's no fat at all. We got to replace what we lost. It's a defendable budget. You heard what the FinCom recommended. You heard what I'm recommending, 230. I'm a very forthright individual. Where did I get the number? I took 5% at that number, 9,500, and I says that's too much to take in one hit. We ought to have a plan for the next couple of years how things are going to go down and rebalance the budget. So if you take it out, we may have to put it back.
Mr. Pasquale, your time is up. Mr. Pasquale, your motion reads to reduce the bottom line to $8,220,279. The Finance Committee contains a motion to amend, contains a reference to the stabilization fund. If I read your motion correctly, then all of your $8,220,279 would come out of general revenue, out of taxation. Is that correct?
Yes, because
all right.
Yes, sir, because my point here is I'm a little bit...
No, I just wanted to clarify what the intent of your motion was. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now faced with a main motion, a motion to amend which was made by the Finance Committee, and a motion to amend the amendment which essentially would propose to replace the Finance Committee amendment in its entirety by a new motion to reduce the budget to $8,220,279. The chair will allow discussion on all three amendments, on all three motions at the same time. Mrs. Patton, please state your name and address.
If we vote no for Mr. Pasquale's, then we vote on the Finance Committee.
That's correct.
If we vote yes for his, then we negate the Finance Committee.
Then we have replaced the Finance Committee amendment with Mr. Pasquale's amendment, and then we will once again have to vote on it in order to